Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about my teaching. Now, I filmed a video last week. It was originally supposed to go up on Monday of last week, and for some reason I kept pushing it back, and I realized that that was my own way of telling myself that I wasn't happy with it, so I apologize for the delay. Anyway, I'm going to take a couple sections of that video and put it in this one because some of the information I laid out is really important, like laying out my responsibilities. So I'm going to talk about my responsibilities in this video because it's really important to understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about things, okay? My responsibilities. So let's just start by explaining one quick thing. I'm what's called a TA. In most programs, a TA is a teaching assistant, which means that they assist a professor and then get to teach one or two lessons at some point. In my program, it means teaching associate, which means that there is no professor in the room. I am the professor. I am the teacher, and that's that. So we are entirely on our own in this. And I'll explain that further in a second. I teach a first-year university class. So all the people that are coming in are first years, and this is a required class. It's called English 101, and I teach composition. And composition is essentially a class that teaches the students how to write academically, and it's setting them up for their academic careers. None of the students in my class are English majors, so I'm teaching them how to write for whatever field they end up going into. So I'm laying down the groundwork. Really important part of this job is the pre-teaching era. So the pre-teaching era essentially is the summer, and I was very overwhelmed this summer because my school has a kind of hands-off policy with TAs, which means that they give you a book to read about teaching, and that's it. I assumed there would be like a week or 2 week kind of course before we started explaining how they want us to go about it, like rules and regulations, stuff like that. That did not happen. We did have a seminar about rules and regulations, but it wasn't specific to TAs, it was to all new employees, so that's that. This hands-off policy also includes the fact that we need to come up with our own syllabus and course outline. A syllabus is essentially the piece of paper where the teacher says what their office hours are, gives you their email, gives you the course description, breaks down how things are graded, attendance policy, so it's all that kind of general setup of the class. So you know how the class is going to be set up and how it's going to be run and how much your final is worth and stuff like that. So that's pretty easy to make because like there is a standard and you can just copy and paste some stuff. So that's not too hard. The course outline, on the other hand, that was an intense experience. Why? Because the course outline is when you write down what is due and what you're doing every day for 17 weeks. Over the summer, I made a document with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and what we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and what they have to read for Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 17 weeks. Planning 17 weeks of work is very overwhelming, especially when there is this hands-off policy because there is no one telling you what to do because their philosophy is that you only learn how to teach by teaching. So as much as it sounds nice to have this kind of freedom, when it's your first time teaching, having this freedom is extremely overwhelming, and their policy is quite hands-off to the point where we get observed teaching once in the semester, and that's it. Otherwise, we are left to our own devices. And honestly, I think that this is a very dangerous method. If you're an organized person and a person who is able to explain things clearly and is able to really verbalize what they think and how how it matters and all that stuff, then great. But if you're a person who doesn't know how to do that, the hands-off policy is terrible because essentially you could be screwing up these students for the rest of their college career because you're not teaching them what they need to know. So obviously the English department has a copy of what we're doing, like the course outline with every week and everything, and so does our overseer. I call her our overseer because we have a class that TAs have to take where it's just us TAs and it's just us 7 girls. And we talk about what works, what doesn't, methodology, pedagogy, stuff like that. But that's the only person who is really in contact with us, and that's not the same as watching us teach or coming to one of our classes. But we do have that one observation. What is it like to have students? These people listen to you, respect you, and maybe even look up to you. What is that like? To be honest, I don't know if they respect me or look up to me. I mean, they've all been respectful and everything, but I don't know that they look up to me or anything like that. I highly doubt it. It's really weird because in a way I feel like YouTube has prepared me, and I've been far less nervous than a lot of people, which I think is thanks to YouTube, because in a way on YouTube I'm putting myself out there to like anyone potentially on the internet to see, and I'm doing that knowing full well that I could get, you know, like a death threat from it or a hate comment that might like upset me or whatever. So I think that when I teach, I kind of brought that with me, and in a way when I teach I almost feel like I'm doing a YouTube video, but I'm being far more educational and professional. So I know that doesn't completely answer the question, but that's kind of what it's like to me. What was your expectation of teaching before you became a professor? Is it what you expected? So I'm not a professor, I'm just an adjunct or teaching associate, as they call me. My expectation, honestly, was kind of the same as what I got. Like, expectation and reality kind of lined up. One of the things that I realized is that I have never been fully able to understand the point of view of a professor, obviously, because you'll never fully understand unless you're in those shoes. I'm not exactly in the shoes of a professor because I don't have a PhD and I'm just teaching composition compared to what I want to actually do, which is teaching literature. But there's so many things that I have such a different perspective on already. How difficult it is to grade is one of the things that like has shocked me the most, just because I've always felt like when I got to the role of teaching, I would just somehow know for some reason, like, you know, like how many points out of 25 do I give this, you know? And it's actually quite complicated and, you know, difficult to even decide, do I have an absolute where I hold everyone to the same standard, or am I holding them just to improve from their previous draft? You know, like there are all these like major decisions that you have to make that are going to directly impact the student. So it's a lot. Is there any advice you can give to those wanting to be a teacher, anything you didn't expect? Honestly, the biggest advice I have is to get as much experience as you can, and the easiest way, at least in the United States, and I think in most places, is to tutor people, and that usually can build up enough for you to eventually get a teaching position, kind of like I did. But essentially just practicing talking to students and finding the ways that you're able to best communicate your ideas, those are really important, because if you have to explain things to people, you need to know where your strengths and weaknesses are and, you know, harness those strengths and just use those in order to give them the best learning experience possible. Ideally, you would get that through tutoring, because I know that they require that for all of us. The only thing that I didn't expect is how taxing it is to grade papers. Like, I knew that it would be, you know, potentially boring at times to read like 27 papers on the same exact thing, but it's almost like a burnout at some point, you know? It's tiring, sure, but it's like a different kind of tired that I hadn't yet experienced, and I don't really know how to describe it apart from saying that it's kind of like the same as when you're editing your own paper so many times over and over again to the point where you're just like, I can't, like your brain feels like it's dead, kind of like that. So I didn't expect that feeling, but then again, like I knew it would be annoying or boring or whatever you want to characterize it as. Someone said, was it something that you always wanted to do? No, for a long time I wanted to be a lawyer, and what I want to really be is a writer, and my mom always thought I would be a really good professor, and part of being a professor is doing research. When you do this research, you can decide what you write. So in a sense, I will be able to be a writer, but also have a job that I like, which is teaching, and that, you know, allows me more stability than being just like a freelance writer or a writer trying to make it big with a book, if that makes sense. And I also really like discussing literature, so I feel like both of my desires, I guess, that sounds a little creepy, would be fulfilled by teaching literature and analyzing literature and talking about it with people. And then there's a side where I can, you know, do my individual work and do my writing. So being a professor is kind of the best of both worlds in that way. But I didn't always know, mainly because I didn't know when I was a kid, obviously, how would I know that being a professor has this aspect of research, which would allow me to do what I want to do while having, you know, a stable job and also having another outlet for my literature needs. What do you think of the students? How are they compared to the students when you were taking the class? If you did not take this class specifically, a similar class you took. So I never took a composition class because I took IB when I was in high school. I was doing the full IB, which essentially is like an AP program, but like the European mode, and it's 2 years, and it's extremely grueling, and I did it when I was at my cutthroat school in China, so like it was really, really intense and very stressful, and part of the reason why I took a gap year. But anyways, thanks to taking those classes when I was in high school, I was able to get, I think, 32 or 35 units out of, I think I needed 180 at UC Irvine. So I automatically kind of skipped, because of my scores in English and stuff, I automatically skipped all of like the composition stuff. So I went straight essentially into literature style classes. So I never took a class like this, which is kind of why it was more scary for me, because I was like, I don't have anything to refer to. Thankfully, Jacob did. So I kind of asked him, you know, like, what did you do, you know, just kind of to get an idea and to wrap my brain around what kind of expectations I should have for these students. A lot of these students are extremely smart and are very willing to participate, and I've been very impressed with them overall. I genuinely thought it was going to be a lot worse, in the sense that when it's your first year, I feel like you're far less likely to participate, especially in your first semester. So since you're less likely to speak in the first year, I was more worried about the participation aspect, because I really wanted to make sure that we had a discussion and there was a sense of comfort in the room, in the sense that when you raise your hand, I didn't want students to feel like other students were judging each other. So like, I'm trying my best to make it that kind of environment. And I don't want to call it a safe environment, because I've made my class completely apolitical, so there's no need for a safe space if there's no politics. But I specifically went out of my way to make every essay apolitical, unless they pick a political topic on an essay where I let them pick their topic. That's up to them. So that was my main concern, really, was, you know, how active they would be as participants in the class, and I think they're doing great, though a lot of them are still very much inside their shell, which I can't really blame them for, to be honest. Those are all the questions I am gonna answer, just because I feel like I've kind of already covered the rest within those questions. Let me know if there are other questions you want me to answer, and I can try and answer them down below. I always read all the comments, but of course I don't have time anymore to answer all of the comments, unfortunately. But yeah, I hope this was somewhat entertaining and interesting. If not, apologies, and you probably didn't make it to this part of the video. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the fan art.